everybody. Welcome to iCast Guidance, your weekly Dungeons and Dragons and TTRPG podcast, where every week Rich, Garret, and I pick up a subject around the culture of gaming and discuss it with you. So without further ado, sharpen up those daggers. We're going to get started right now. All right, I just want to put out there that I think it's January 26th, is historically the most depressing day of the year. From the standpoint of actual data, this is the date that most people report severe depression. Okay. And I'm not going to lie, this sucks.
It fucking sucks. Terrible week.
I mean, look, I like to be the most positive person in the room. I like to really kind of, focus on what's good. But I'm kind of like, I'm cold. I'm tired. I'm sore. I'm fucking sick. I'm really just over it.
All right, I'm not going to lie. This week was cold.
Yeah.
Earlier in the week, it was bearable, but it was rough.
I got in my car and the little thing said -3.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, this is the fucking week I'm taking public transportation every day. Walking around and shit. It was terrible.
So you're not only on someone else's vehicle, you're in with a bunch of germy people.
Yeah, 100%.
Oh, my God.
Yep. Subways in New York City.
Oh,
disgusting.
Nice. Yeah, I just, a friend of mine, I was talking to a friend of mine on the phone the other day, and he said, yeah, we took a vacation. We took a week and went down to St. Martin. And it just, I'm the type of person to be like, oh my God, that's awesome. How was it? Blah, blah, blah. But the first thing that came flying out of my mouth was, oh, you fucker.
You piece of shit.
I was so mad. I was like, wait a minute. You're not allowed to get out of this. Come on.
I mean, the past week, they saw it snow in Florida. So, yeah. I mean, you weren't getting too far from it.
Yeah.
But then also California's on fire.
California is on fire.
How does this work? I don't get it.
Yeah. Well, here we are. So hopefully today we're going to bring you something fun to listen to, because we got a good topic today. We're talking about actual play scenarios on YouTube channels like Critical Role and Dimension 20 and the impact that they have on the culture of role play gaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, especially you forgot the biggest one, which is Wither and Bloom's actual play sessions.
Do you think we have an impact on the culture of gaming at this point?
I think we are the biggest.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Critical Role copied us.
We're the biggest up and coming.
A girl can dream, right?
Isn't it, Todd? I'm going to stop you for a second.
Oh, here we go.
Isn't it you? Because I'm the one that normally says those comments.
What, a girl can dream?
No. That,
pessimistic comments.
I'm the pessimistic person that's, like, all right, we're just another D&D podcast or not podcast, another D&D live play. And you're like, but we could be the big one.
Yeah. What happened to you?
So what happened?
Who hurt you?
Who hurt you? Nothing happened necessarily. I am still, look, I don't do a thing without the energy, positivity, and determination to do that thing the best I possibly can. Otherwise, I'm not going to waste my time, right? And you guys have heard this from me before. So nothing has happened other than the fact that I'm cold.
All right,
I'm fucking cold. That's it.
He's a little off this week.
I'm a little off this week. A lot.
He's got a little sniffle.
I got sniffles. You can hear from my voice that I'm a little nasally, and maybe by the end of this podcast, I'll sound like a full-on frog. But whatever, I'm still going to do it. We're still here. I didn't call it off. We're still here.
No, we persevere.
We will move on. Got a comment?
Yeah.
What's the comment, Garret?
I closed it.
You piece of shit.
The comment was from rabbit.com. We love rabbit.com. Listens to everything we put out.
Rabbit.com's on the Discord now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Goated.
And puts amazing comments out there. We love it. But what I thought was funny is in rabbit.com's last comment on our podcast on the YouTube channel, made a comment that hot take, or iCast Guidance, a D&D podcast, is not a D&D podcast. It's an RPG podcast. Both Rich and I told Todd this a long time ago that maybe we should change the title of it
to Tabletop Role Playing
Games. A TTRPG podcast.
Yeah. Because we talk about a lot more than just D&D.
We talk about a lot of different things. But the other thing is, the D&D, there's an argument to keeping the D&D podcast title in there just because it's a draw. but
look, Rich has been making fun of my thumbnail for this thing since the day I made it, right? Mm-hmm. And I like to take feedback, right? And this is okay. This is how this works, right?
Here we go.
I gotta
let him cook. Let him.
I got a thing. Like did you ever have that thing? Did you ever have like that partner or that spouse that you'll tell them something over and over and over again? Like, you should drink organic milk. You should drink organic milk. And they're like, fuck that. I'm not spending all that money in drinking organic milk. Right. And then someone at work says to them, you should drink organic milk. And they come home and they're like, did you ever hear of organic milk?
Yeah, just fuck you, rabbit.com.
He doesn't mean that.
Wow.
But the point is this, is that Rich has been telling me, Garrett's been telling me, Rabbit comes in and I'm like, yeah, okay, let's change it.
Yeah. What the fuck is that, dude? It's nuts. I'm doing a hostile takeover of all the fucking thumbnails and titles on this YouTube channel.
And you do a good job with them. Like the ones on your role-playing videos are fantastic. I love them.
Thank you, Rabbit. This was definitely a hot take.
Yeah.
It brought out some in us.
It works.
We're going to figure it out, Rabbit. Don't
worry. Okay. So today's topic, we're talking about the impact of shows like Critical Role in our space, and what it does to the culture of gaming and how things have changed. Now, we all know the Matt Mercer effect. Most of us have heard that. But if you haven't heard of the Matt Mercer effect, what is that?
The Matt Mercer effect is when new DMs or new players expect the game to be run exactly the way that Matt Mercer does, with the type of charisma, voice talent, and storytelling that he does. And it kind of negates the fact that all DMs and players are going to be unique to themselves. Every table is going to be different. No table is going to look exactly the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So we got that. And I mean, I've got a bunch of rabbit holes to go down today, but, I think that, we have to start off by saying that those situations, Dimension 20, Critical Role, are enviable play tables. They're enviable spaces to play in. Brennan Lee Mulligan's humor and speed and wit is phenomenal. The voices are phenomenal. There's so many things to sort of look up to with this stuff. So if I ever was not a gamer and I came to Dungeons and Dragons for the first time through Critical Role, I'd be like, holy shit, this is cool. Right? So what's the problem?
So I don't think there's a problem. I mean, if you're going to look at Brennan Lee Mulligan or Matt Mercer, like Rich was kind of explaining the effect, and feel like you have to live up to those standards, that could be a problem. But like Rich was saying, it's your own table. It's your own game. I mean, just play to the best of your abilities. And then your group is just you're going to form your own, your own world together. But Todd, I wanted to ask you the whole Matt Mercer effect. Do you feel stressed or do you feel influenced by someone like Matt Mercer or Brennan Lee Mulligan to hold to a standard or to DM in a certain way?
I don't know if I necessarily feel pressure from that sort of thing, but do I take influence from it? Yeah. I mean, do I study it? No. I've watched Critical Role. I don't watch it so much anymore, but did I learn things from Matt Mercer? Did I learn things from Brennan Lee Mulligan? Yeah, totally.
So it's interesting, right? Because from an artist perspective, you never really want to emulate. And that's where the danger is in trying to emulate what you're seeing. What you want to do is take inspiration and take the best parts of what you see, learn from it, and build up your own game and your own style by taking your favorite things from that. But like I always say, you're only going to be you. So stick with that brand and find out what your brand is, what type of game you're going to run.
Yeah, Rich, like, I know what you're saying, to like be your own person and stuff like that. And I just want to look at this from like, because Todd and Rich, you both DM. Rich, you're a fantastic player. Me looking at this, I am a huge fan of Critical Role. That's how I kind of came into this. And, I am not a professional actor, anything like that.
What?
What? No, I'm not.
You're not?
Wow.
But no, I gotta say, looking at it from like a player's perspective and watching shows like Critical Role and stuff like that, I just gotta say that like I take inspiration from how the players are at that table, and you know how they describe their attacks, or you know, just I take that as inspiration, and I don't want to be like them, because then I think that is a problem. If you're like, oh, I gotta be like Sam Riegel, or I gotta play like this person, I think that could be an issue. But if you look at it and you'd be like, you know, I can do better, and then try to do better. And I definitely have.
Well, I would throw in there that one place I think is, you know, from the enviable, I want to be like this sort of situation, that group of friends, you know, to see the 8 of them sort of perform. And please excuse the word perform. I don't mean perform as in performance, but I mean, they can get together and function as a group of friends in like one of the highest capacities. Now, I always wondered, like, who's the problem child there? Is there one, or is there, what are the issues that they might have there? But if there is such a thing, you never see it. Mm-hmm. And I love that. I feel like it's like, wow, it must be so nice to make a life out of the things you do with your friends on that level. And I'm not going to lie. If I'm pulling anything from Critical Role from the standpoint of pressure, it's that I want us to be like that.
Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of stuff you can emulate when it comes to like group dynamics and like just the way they feel comfortable enough to completely role play. Like anything they do is going to be yes-anded and, you know, like appreciated and taken at face value. That is a thing I definitely try to take from what I see on those kind of shows.
Yeah. And I think just to kind of go on what you're saying, Rich, the way that shows like that, Matt just lets them take the ball and run with it and tell the story around the table.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't even have, there are sessions where he will just sit back and not talk for an hour.
I love that.
Because the players at that table are just role playing so fantastically and they're just running the story. And we've taken inspiration from that because we're just, you know, we're trying to get better and better and better at that to be, you know, collaborative storytellers at our table.
Well, there's a level of trust that we're trying to get to, right? Like the trust to be able to be like, all right, I'm going to take this moment. I'm going to run with it and do something like really, you know, vulnerable. Maybe your character has like a really emotional moment. And like, if you were to do that and like get like shot down in shot down, and I don't know why I'm losing the word, but like people just get annoyed with what you're doing and they like disregard it. Mm-hmm. That would really make me not want to do it in the future. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? So there's a level of trust that needs to come into play.
Well, I also think that there's a big part of this. You know, let's be realistic here. The Matt Mercer effect is typically not used in a kind way by the tabletop role-playing game community. They talk about it from the standpoint of, you know, this is not the way the mm-hmm. game is. And so why are we letting this influence us? And I think if we're going to talk about this, you know, from equal sides, and I want to approach this from two sides, then we got to look at that too. Like the bad side of this. And I really am interested in this on some level. Like who out there is really, you know, sort of pissed off about the Matt Mercer effect? And I think I have some thoughts on that, but I kind of want to steer it that way for a little bit. Like what's the problem here?
The problem here is when players come into a new game and they tell their DM they're wrong or the way they're running the game isn't right because it's not exactly like Matt Mercer. Well, yeah, that's where that comes in. Okay. So to me, it's sort of like this, right? I'm thinking about it this way. We know that, you know, these shows have brought tons of new people to the gaming space, right? We know that people are now playing Dungeons and Dragons or different TTRPGs because they saw Dimension 20 or they saw Critical Role. And that's their first impression. Okay, we get that. But what I think is starting to happen is the people that have been invested in these games for a long time have sort of seen this influx of people that come in with the Critical Role attitude as a kind of tourist, as a kind of person that does not fully understand the culture. Think about it. If you're a tourist and you're going someplace you've never been before, you don't fully understand the culture
But there you are. So Floridians always talk about the snowbirds, the people from the Northeast that come down just in the wintertime. They don't fully understand the culture. They're there for the warm weather. I think that that's very synonymous with the type of people that are entering the gaming space right now. Now, I don't believe those people to be like that, but I do believe that the sort of entrenched culture of tabletop role-playing games, the people who have been at it for a long time, they see them that way. That's part of the problem.
Yeah, I remember like back when I was starting to get into D&D, we had our game here, Todd, at the table, and then I wanted more because we weren't playing enough. And I went to my local game store, and it was a comic book store, and the game that I played was just like so. I just want to word. I'm going to use the word shitty. Mm-hmm. The guy was horrible. The players were horrible. And I'm watching shows like Critical Role and viewing these people and their table and just like how insanely good it is. But then you get this perception that it's like, I want to go play this. And then you don't get that. You don't get that like interaction or the role play or whatever. You're like, okay, what's wrong here?
Well, all right. Can I have a hot take?
Yeah,
can I go down the hot take? Because based on what you just said, I also have a fucking theory about this, and it really makes me angry. So as a 25 plus year arts and design professor I've taught at some of the best institutions on earth. There is this thing that happens. You will hear a contingent of faculty and administrators who will over and over again tell parents, oh, you don't really need to know how to draw anymore to design. And I've heard this, or to make art. You don't really have to know how to draw. Okay. So I'm starting to hear this more and more. It's a popular opinion about the ability to do a thing, right? And I'm like, who are these people? And over and over and over again, I see it. The people who are critical of the thing that requires the talent are the people that they themselves can't do the thing. So if you're incapable of drawing, you will create an intellectualized argument for why drawing is not necessary. Not because it's really not necessary, but because you yourself can't do it. Mm-hmm. So my guess is, and oh my God, the whole fucking internet's coming for me on this one.
Fuck them.
But my guess is that the people who have the biggest problem with Critical Role are the ones who have the hardest time with playing that particular game. Fair enough. And that's not to invalidate their game, right? That's not. I think that their game, however distant it is from the Critical Role theatrical experience, is still a valid game, right? But I think they're insecure about that now that they're faced with this other thing that seems to be popular. We were never popular as gamers, right?
Nope.
Never. But now all of a sudden it's popular. Why? Because Matt Mercer made it popular. And I don't like Matt Mercer because of that. That's what these people are doing.
Well, right? Other people are coming into the hobby and becoming more successful than they were. And it makes them insecure.
Well, or yes, maybe, but I don't know if they ever wanted success necessarily.
Or validation as like, this is what top tier play looks like.
Correct.
And they've been thinking for years that they are top tier play.
Correct. That's right. That's exactly right. There's this other side of it. All right. So let's look at where are some other examples out there in the world where this has happened. Like, where is there a culture of a thing where a person comes along and makes that thing change the expectations of how that thing is supposed to be?
Okay, you ready for this one?
Yeah, give me it.
I got the biggest one.
Okay.
Marlon Brando changed acting.
Oh, I love this. Let me hear it.
Marlon Brando came in at his time when everybody was still doing that kind of like over the top vaudeville style of acting, right? He came in and he did Streetcar Named Desire, and he did it like a human being. And he went in there and just behaved like anybody would under these imaginary circumstances.
Is this method acting?
It's he came in. I believe he was a student of Sandy Meisner, which is also what I am. But it's not method acting. No.
Okay, I'm not familiar with the term. So,
but he came in under the Meisner technique, and he brought this naturalistic style that audiences really enjoyed. But there was a lot of pushback in the industry from people that were like, what is this guy doing? People don't want to see somebody behave like it's just real life. You know what I mean? Like that, it needs to be over the top. It needs to be dramatic. And he started a revolution of people that joined acting and because of what they saw in him. And they wanted to, learn how to do that. So that the other teachers came up, like Stella Adler and Sandy Meisner and all that stuff. And the best actors nowadays are actors who have this style. This has become the way of the industry, the standard.
Right. But one could argue that Marlon Brando did that for the betterment of acting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll give you an example of somebody who did it for the detriment of a field. And don't get me wrong, I kind of love this guy. Okay. So I'm not knocking this guy. I'm just saying that it changed the culture of the genre for, I think, the worse. And that's Bob Ross. Bob Ross in the world of painting, right? Okay. I love Bob Ross. I love taking a nap to Bob Ross. I think Bob Ross is a sweetheart.
Fair.
Right? But here's what he did. He democratized painting, right? He made painting very approachable and accessible, and he made it look like it was supposed to happen fast, and it was supposed to be an enjoyable experience. Okay. Now, those perceptions are problematic because painting is not always fast. Painting is not always enjoyable. And painting also should not necessarily be as formulaic as Bob Ross made it out to be. So you ask anybody, about painting in the United States, most lay people who are not fine artists, and that's their guy. That's who they're going to go to.
Mm-hmm.
That's a problem.
Let's paint some happy little trees.
Let's paint some happy little trees. But don't get me wrong. Like when he talks about happy mistakes, that's a fantastic thing. So there's good and bad inside of this.
I guess it sometimes there's a market to open up a more difficult field to the general public. And that does well sometimes.
Yeah.
Well, I wouldn't say D&D falls in that category. Like what has happened has inspired more people, right? But the way they want to play is harder than it looks. I wouldn't say it made anything easier. Well,
I would say, because you hear this term to democratization thrown around a lot, like democratizing a thing. So what does that mean? It means we're trying to sort of make it available for everyone, right? And in a lot of ways, Stranger Things, Critical Role, Dimension 20, all of a sudden opened up a very closed off thing and said, hey, it's okay to do this. You don't have to be a nerd, right? And said, okay, now it's for everybody. But here's the problem with that is I don't necessarily believe that kind of democratization is always a good thing. I'm going to dig into that a little bit deeper after the break, actually. And we're not taking the break right this second, but I want to hold back on that for a second.
I also have something I'm waiting until next.
The second half?
Yeah, the second half to talk about.
Yeah.
But I want to talk about like how going from just a game around a table that we play to actually producing a show ourselves, how that has affected our group, the way we play and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because I think that, if we're guilty of anything in the Matt Mercer effect, it's that we took our game and turned it into a YouTube channel. And you can't deny, if we're going to sit here and talk about how we've watched Critical Role, and here we are on YouTube and on Podbean and Apple Podcasts and all of that, you can't deny that that's pushed us that way a little bit.
Oh, 100%. I think it was definitely an inspiration because they let us know that it was possible.
Yeah.
And if we could wake up every day and do this shit as our job, we would do that in a heartbeat.
Yeah. Well, actually, the other people that did that for me were the Dungeon Dudes and Ginny D.
That's where it initially came from.
Yeah. Ginny D pushed us over the edge.
When we were at PAX last year, not 2024, 2023.
Yep.
Todd and I went to a panel, and it was Ginny D and Dungeon Dudes, and they were talking about how they got started and how, you can get into the, YouTube space or Twitch space or whatever to produce content or shows.
Right. And basically the idea was, what are you waiting for? Go home and do it. And I had already run a 2-year-long YouTube channel. So, we came to the whole table with gear. Like I had stuff from that sitting in a box. So, yeah. But again, if I had taken the pressure that a show like Critical Role could have created for me and let that be the thing by which I decided what I did, I never would have done it, because I'm not going to kid myself and say, I will do better than them. No, that's not it. I did it because, number one,
I think some of my favorite times with you guys before we started doing this as a channel, I love the fact that we could get together like at a holiday dinner and we would sit around the table and we would get so immersed in conversations about this game mechanic or this character or this scenario we played out in a game. And I was like, man, I wish we could share these stories with people. That's what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
You know,
we did that even sometimes when the rest of the people around the party were just like, please stop talking about the D&D.
Oh my God. Yeah, we were annoying.
But I think a lot of good has come from us turning this into a show. I think when the cameras are on and people are watching, it makes people want to do better, want to role play to the best of their ability, tell the top kind of stories. I think it stopped us from being complacent in our betterment.
Well, I mean, I would hope so, right? But I think there's this side of it too. And this goes back to what it means to be in a classroom environment is when you are around like-minded people for a similar purpose and you see others in the room that do things differently than you. You decide what you're going to take, you decide what you're going to leave behind, and you evolve and change based on those two things, right? And so yeah, I'd like to think that what we do helps people have a better gaming experience, right? But and I can find examples of that myself. Like, let me think of one. I did a little bit of creative role play, a little bit of creative world building with Jay, who was on our podcast once when we were talking about that stuff. And one of their comments when we were talking about world building was, I try to think about what the dirt looks like in a world. And I had never heard that saying before. And I was like, oh my God. Right. So there's a little thing I pulled in. And so these things, Critical Role, Dimension 20, a comment that a good world builder will make, they all become parts of your own selected, hand curated box of tools that you're going to use. You leave stuff behind. Like what am I going to leave behind from Critical Role? I'm going to leave behind the pressure. Right. And I'm going to take with me this idea of camaraderie. Right. That's what's coming with me.
Yeah.
All right. Listen, let's do that. We're going to run and we're going to take a break. You're going to hear some words. And then when we come back, I want to go down this rabbit hole of, number one, this idea of democratization. I want to talk a little bit more about tourism, and I want to talk a little bit more. I'm sitting here talking and I'm thinking about other examples of people in spaces that have changed the culture. All right. We'll be right back. Hello, esteemed listeners. Listen, if you like what we're doing here on iCast Guidance, we have a brand new way that you could possibly say thanks for doing what it is that we do. And don't get us wrong, we love to do this, and we come together every week. We're spending all of our week trying to think about how we're going to present you a new topic. We're doing the research, and frankly, we love it. We love getting together to talk about this stuff. But we thought we should put into play some kind of system where if you wanted to pop in and buy us a cup of coffee because you like listening to the show, that we gave you a way to do that. So we are now on coffee.com, and coffee is spelled ko-fi.com/Wither and Bloom Studios. You can head over to that site and you could leave us a tip, or you could even sign up for a monthly membership if you want to. And by doing this, you say to us that you really love what we're up to and you hope that we keep going. And frankly, when we get those tips, we feel supported. We feel like, oh yeah, cool. This is, we're getting some affirmation here. That's great. So anyway, consider heading over there and doing that. And if you can't afford to, that's okay. Tell a friend about the podcast, spread the word about us, and get other people to listen to us. We would appreciate that as well. Anyway, thanks again for listening, and let's get back to the show. All right, we're back from the break, and it's time for 3-sentence backstory, people. Now, for those of you that don't know 3-sentence backstory, the way this works is we are creating a whole sort of tome of potential character backstories that we make in 3 sentences. And the 3 sentences are, where are you from? What's a significant thing that happened to you in your life? And what put you on the road to adventure? So who's going to start us off today?
I got it.
Okay.
I'm from a village of hags.
A whole village of hags.
Yep.
Wow, Hag Village.
Oh. You want to take that, Todd?
I guess I could go second, but can I just clarify something? Am I one of the hags or was I raised by the hag?
Last time you said I gave too much information.
Oh,
okay. Fine. I got you. I appreciate that feedback. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
You're from a village of hags. I would say I was raised by these hags, and a significant thing that happened in my life is a lot of tension was brewing with the hags. And once when they were having an argument, I was able to grab the nearest bag and race out the door. Thus, I have a hag bag.
Well, I mean, what led me to the road of adventure is I have this hag bag, and now I'm trying to find a group of people to go back and slaughter these hags. My life coming up was horrible. And my goal in life is to rid the land of these hag town.
You're a hag hunter.
Hag hunter. Sure.
Now, what the fuck's a hag bag? Is that like an item
what's
they
a hag
have? Like,
What's a hag bag?
is that like a thing, or you just said that?
What is in this hag bag?
Sometimes when words rhyme, we put them together and they're fun.
God, you fucking suck, dude.
What?
You suck. Sometimes when our equipment gets weird and worry and like stirring, I want to punch it with my fist. I want to punch it till it stops making noises.
Cool. So I have a number for a therapist. All right, let's move on.
Let's bring it in. Let's go back to our conversation.
Let's go back to our conversation because I've got some stuff. So, I thought it was cool before that we were trying to seek out some people that sort of shifted the culture of a thing for better or for worse and changed it forever. And you brought up Marlon Brando, and then I brought up Bob Ross, right? But I've got another one because you made me start thinking about films, right? And there is no doubt that Alfred Hitchcock changed the way suspense was done forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because now all of a sudden, the thriller film all of a sudden has a kind of like complexity to the intellect that hadn't been there before. Hitchcock brings this in, which is really kind of cool.
Well, he kind of brought in like the idea of the film itself being a mystery and the way you film it telling clues to the answers for the audience just as well as the script or the acting.
Right. So I think, if we're going to talk Matt Mercer effect and whether or not it was a good thing, whether or not it was a democratizing thing, I think it's interesting to think about how often this happens, and we're not necessarily referencing those things when we're saying the Matt Mercer effect is good or bad, right? So we're like, wow, there's so many different things. Like I could think of like Julia Child's effect on cooking, right? Like all of a sudden now cooking has a show because I think she was the first person to do that, right? We never really like saw that before. Or Walt Disney's effect on animation, right?
I have a question though.
Yeah.
When these things get democratized and they get widespread, and this is kind of like a hipster type thing, but do they lose a little bit of their cool? Do they lose a little bit of their allure?
I would say 100% they do. And this goes back to the tourism thing, I think, to some degree. So think about this for a minute. When we worry that the impact of tourists is going to negatively impact a culture, you are going to another space with an embedded culture. Something has existed for thousands of years, and all of a sudden it becomes popular. Right? People start going there. Well, what happens? How does it get eroded? How does that impact it negatively? What goes on?
You got anything with that, Rich? I mean,
I'm not going to lie. I zoned out.
My talking has become a point of.
No, I don't want you to take it like that.
Okay.
I got distracted.
It's okay. So let me backtrack for a second. All right. You got a culture. You have something that has existed for 1,000 years, and all of a sudden it gets discovered and tourists start flocking there. Okay. So now all of a sudden there's this fear that the tourism industry will dilute the authenticity of the culture. Why? Well, for a lot of reasons. One, you've got a group of outside people who don't genuinely understand it. They're coming there for a kind of commodification of the culture, right? It's like, oh, now we can sell little trinkets. Now we can kind of, create an economy out of this thing, right?
Yeah, well, because it existed for a reason first, right? Like, let's say like some punk music existed as a way to stick it to the man, right?
Right. And then when Green Day happened,
and a bunch of yuppies come and they're like, oh my God, I love this music. And they're like, oh my God, I love the brand of like being a bad boy.
Makes me feel so good.
Yeah. And then it's just like, all right, you're going to completely dilute like the entire message we had. It makes it less powerful.
Right. And I think that definitely applies to those of us that played Dungeons and Dragons as kids, right? Because we believed very, very deeply in what we were doing, and we paid for it in that we got the shit beat out of us sometimes. We got made fun of, or, people just looked at us like we were Satanists. There was a whole thing in the 80s about
cult.
We were a cult, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we paid for that dedication. And then somebody took it and made it cool, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now everybody's coming. So this is some way in which I'm starting to wonder, like, I'm trying to draw parallels between democratization and commodification, how those two things kind of go hand in hand. It's to make something available to everyone. There is a price, but it's a different kind of price. But
I think that like when things are a little bit less discoverable, more, I would say, more stimulating people find it when it's harder to find. But when you make it readily available, let me take a hot take here. When you make it readily available to the village idiot, they're going to come by and, wow, this is great. And they're going to come be an idiot.
Well, I like that, because now all of a sudden you're saying it's going to be found by the person who puts in the effort. And that person would be welcome to the fold because they showed that they put in the work. Mm-hmm. It's almost like you have to pay your dues to be part of what this is.
Yeah.
Right. But that also then sounds so dickishly exclusive.
Well, it's true. Not everybody's rad in the world.
Well, right. But I'm almost like, okay. So here's the question.
What is this podcast?
Here's the question. No. Here's the question. Does the democratization of a thing cheapen the thing?
You can look at it that way.
I don't believe the Matt Mercer effect does this, but I'm wondering.
No, I don't think this has anything to do with that. But
no, it's a little parallel to D&D, because I think from like a capitalistic standpoint, it has cheapened it a little bit. Freaks like Elon Musk want to buy it now, and they want to like destroy it, as they always do. And like Hasbro is following the money, and it's like, yeah, they're pandering now to these people that have come by in the past couple of years instead of pandering to the people that have been here.
But I think you can look at that in the complete opposite direction. It has opened it up to so many different third-party contents that if you don't go with the big Hasbro and you just reach out there a little bit, the stuff you can find is, incredible. Different books or different sources from other people that might be so much more dedicated to the actual heart of it.
Well, yeah, and this is exactly where I was going to run with this, and I'm glad you brought that up, because now all of a sudden that the floodgates have opened for Dungeons and Dragons, all of the people that work hard at this have sort of burrowed down deeper into the soil and have gone to the places like Daggerheart and Shadowdark and Cosmere, and we're all of a sudden moving into those spaces. It's like, okay, where can we find an even deeper experience now that the masses have come, and sort of taken over?
God, I'm like hearing this podcast. I'm like, I would hate us if I heard this.
I mean, okay, some people might hate us for this, but this is your, take, Todd, on the tourists. The resort is going to be flooded with, the normal people, but the people that are deep down know that you got to venture into the town.
Oh, yeah.
And find this little spot.
To find the authentic food, you got to leave the resort.
You got to look at it like that.
I love that.
And what Rich was saying, you've got to put in the work. You know?
So here's what it does. Like when the normies come, let's say like from a video game perspective.
Do you call them normies?
Sure. When the muggles
When the muggles show up.
Oh my gosh.
when the muggles show up that need things to be handed to them in a silver platter, they're the main big thing that used to be becomes commodified. But it does become successful enough to to reach out and expand into different, tinier, more specific avenues that the people that were there previously will seek out. In a sense, the same way that some gaming things used to be much more original back in the day, like let's say like Rockstar Games or something, or like Call of Duty, right? But as gaming became mainstream and you don't get bullied for doing it anymore, a lot of normal people play games like 2K and like Call of Duty and all these things. But now like the real gamers are like, oh, gaming's with like the indie market. You know, that's where gaming really is. That's where the heart of it is.
Well, I think that's because the edge, right? If we talk about the at the front edge of the creation of these things, you're always going to have the sort of more authentic, difficult experience to wrap your head around, right? Mm-hmm. So that's going to only be participated in by the people who have really said, this is my thing, right? Mm-hmm. So you're always looking for that edge. But then, of course, the edge, right? That cutting edge is leaving behind a massive swath of fabric that's being filled in by, as you put it, the normies, the ones that find it to be we're paving the way for people to play these games in an easier, more popularized fashion, right?
I love that. Like, it's like the people that are really into it want to be on the new frontier of it. Keep expanding it for the people that, you know, come in a little bit later. And I'm trying to word that better than normies because
but don't get me wrong. You know, remember we started off talking about the Matt Mercer effect here. And I have to say that the Matt Mercer effect was in itself its own cutting edge because it did something that nothing like this had ever done before. Mm-hmm. Right. And now that cutting edge has kind of like been cut, it is now filling in the space with everything that it welcomed into the space. And it's like, hey, look at how much fun this can be. Come do this. Right. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think it takes the edge and pushes it that much further out and says, all right, now everyone's here. We got to do something new. I think it's the desire to go forward.
Yeah. Then, all right, they brought me to a random place and I'm going to bring it in because I don't, fuck it. When these players come in and they tell their DMs that like, hey, Matt Mercer wouldn't do this, or hey, I want you to run your game a little bit more like this. Is that ever welcome?
Does that ever happen?
Yes.
Did that happen to you?
No, I just listened to RPG horror stories.
Okay. So wait, what's the question again? Because I'm hearing you say this thing and I'm thinking, I've never heard that before.
So like, is that valid? Like for people to come in and kind of tell their DM the kind of game that they want to play and tell them like, hey, like I'm not liking the way you're running this.
Well, wait a minute. Isn't that how we deal with session zero anyway? It's like, well, what are my expectations for the game versus yours? This whole podcast is about expectations.
Yeah.
Right. It's about the expectations the OG original gaming community had when, you know, D&D was an underground thing, and how the expectations of the new people coming to the game have been changed by the Matt Mercer effect. Right. Mm-hmm. And how expectations in all of these things, like the approach to painting that I challenged with the Bob Ross thing, there was an expectation for what painting was supposed to be. Bob Ross made that different. And Bob Ross was famous for it, right? Matt Mercer is famous for it. I'm not necessarily making a plug for being famous, but there is a draw to changing people's expectations, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that's not a bad thing.
I agree.
I saw, it might have even been almost the same comment or something, Rich. When I was doing a little research on this, I saw something like that where it was like a guy coming to the table saying, like pretty much going to the DM saying, I don't think you're doing this right, or you should do this different. There's definitely got to be a way to approach that you can come together and work together.
Mm-hmm. Like what kind of game do you want to play in?
Yeah.
And what kind of game do I want to run? And let's see if that matches up.
And I mean, if there's something wrong with your table, maybe you got to move on and find a different table.
Mm-hmm.
different group.
Well, let's be real here. There's no outcome where somebody doing an awesome thing with D&D is bad, right? Like in the bottom line, like these shows are the peak of what D&D is at the moment.
I gotta say, you know, being a huge Critical Role fan, I haven't watched much Dimension 20. I know, Rich, you have more in that aspect, but I've seen more recently. Like being a Critical Role fan, Todd, you and I went to the Daggerheart live show at Christmas. The group, the community around these big shows is massive. Mm-hmm. Seeing these people come together, it's a community. I mean, Critical Role, they call themselves critters. The cosplay, the opportunities for like people to get out there and just have a group that everyone knows they're friends, kind of. You see someone else cosplay or someone else with a Critical Role shirt on at a convention or something like that. It's like, okay, I have a connection to that person.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's amazing what that's doing to the space. It's bringing so many people. And just the other day, Dimension 20, didn't they sell out Madison Square Garden with a massive show? All these shows are doing that. And I just think it's fantastic. And then you have like Stranger Things. It brings D&D into the spotlight of other people that may have never seen it. I don't think there's a problem with that. I think it's a good thing. Bring more people to it.
Well, and on top of that, if you look at the evolution of a game like Dungeons and Dragons, and we go back to 1974 when, you have the very, very beginnings with Gary Gygax and how that game grew out of miniature wargaming and terrain. Right. And so where does it go? Well, it starts out in sort of a more idealized version of that, which was role play light at best. We were not dealing with character backstories back then. Right. Mm-hmm. But we have grown and evolved into a much more story driven, role play heavy situation that has combat still. Right. But I would almost say that combat has taken a back seat to the role play end of things.
Well, of course, you're not going to enter combat without a good reason or motivation to.
Or it makes combat more interesting when you do, especially when the characters have investment in one another and that their possible death is actually going to mean something. It adds gravity to the game. So here we are talking about Matt Mercer and Critical Role and how this just, to me, seems like the next logical step in pushing the game more towards role play. And then what do? They create Daggerheart, which takes it another step. Mm-hmm. So I find this to be, I would wonder if the people that push back against the Matt Mercer effect are also fearing the loss of a side of the game that they, I don't think it's going to go away. Like, I think that loss is superficial. It's not real, right? But maybe they fear that that's what's coming.
Well, I think also instead of changing D&D to morph into what these role players want, these role players created their own game.
Right. Mm-hmm. Right.
They moved away without wanting to change it.
Yeah, I got to say, originally, when I started playing Dungeons and Dragons 5 years ago or something, Todd, that I kind of came to you and we started playing, I'm not going to lie. I was all about dice, numbers, and just that stuff.
Crunch factor.
Crunch factor. I never got into deep backstory or role play or any of that. I was here for, I wanted to play a game with dice and, fantasy creatures and shit like that. But now that, we've got this table and this group of friends, it has become something completely different. So I understand the people that might have the pushback on the Matt Mercer effect or the deep storytelling role play, because there are people out there that just want to not necessarily war game, but play that crunchy factor of D&D.
Right. Well, and I guess that where the difficulty genuinely is in all of this is when that player comes to your table and you play this game and they play that game, or they want a different game, I think is what it comes down to. Okay. I mean, I'll buy that. And I got to tell you, tracking whether or not someone has had food or water every day, tracking the weight in your pack to make sure that you are not encumbered, tracking distances over time when you're traveling. I love those things. Love them.
The minutia.
Yeah. yeah, I think that stuff is great. All right. Well, listen, I think that's going to wrap it up for us. But I thought this was a really interesting discussion, and I wouldn't mind revisiting it as we sort of, encounter more of this and hear these discussions. But you guys have been great. I wanted to throw a plug in there for our first and third Tuesdays of every month. We are playing our Rising campaign live on YouTube. And we've been kind of working really hard at getting audience participation in this game. So we have goals that are set in the game that you can super chat to fulfill those goals. And when you do it, our players get things. So you almost function like sponsors that can help the players during combat or during the game in general. So come on over to YouTube on the first and third Tuesdays of every month at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to check out Rising at Wither and Bloom Studios. It's going to be a great time. Guys, thank you so much for listening to us. We love to have you along for the ride. Please tell a friend that our podcast exists. Garret, Rich, this was awesome. It's been a pleasure.
Send a comment over on YouTube. How do you feel about the Matt Mercer effect? Has it affected your table? What do you think about these larger shows?
Yeah, I would love that. And
love to see some.
We'll certainly read one on the air next week.
Mm-hmm.
And Rich, I promise you two things. Okay. In parting today, I promise you two things. One, we will redo the thumbnail for this podcast. Okay. Thank you, rabbit.com. And two, what was two? I was going to promise you a second thing.
Titles?
No. I said I was going to promise you two things and I can't fucking remember the second thing. I will change. I'm going to change the thumbnail for this. Okay. Let's get that out of the way right away.
Okay. Thank God.
All right. Good. Guys, we'll see you next week.
Peace.
Take care.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to iCast Guidance. iCast Guidance is produced by Todd Lambrix, Garret Brennan, and Rich Frohman. We drop this podcast every week, and we are looking forward to having you hang out for more. Don't forget to head on over to Wither and Bloom Studios on YouTube, follow our channel, and definitely comment on what you see there. We will probably read those on this show. Thanks again for listening. We look forward to next time.